Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Julio Jones are the big names possibly to be moved before the season, but it's the tight end position with the most value to gain as potential fantasy starters in 2021. Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, I wanted to start with the tight ends because Zach Ertz, we've been waiting, it seems to be a couple years now with Dallas Goedert producing well. Ertz was hurt last year, but it seems like he's got to go with how much money they can save, over $8 million, and how many teams out there need tight end.
Yeah, and you're more excited about this from the Dallas Goedert angle than the Ertz angle. Would be my suspicion. But yeah, I think there's definitely teams in need. I think Buffalo cleared up some cap space by restructuring Stephon Diggs just today, and so I think and they've signaled that they want to address the tight end position. So that's one that's commonly mocked there. I think sending Ertz to Buffalo in a trade. So that would be one to watch for. But yeah, I think how much it unleashes Goddard, specifically with the fact that you don't have a firm wide receiver one locked in. I think that's a really interesting situation for Goddard for sure.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that most of these tight ends we're going to reference in this segment look at the competition if they stay, and it's ambiguous. Is anyone going to be a top 10, among that duo or trio? Yet, if you fracture them and split them apart, all of a sudden now you could have two fantasy viable options for streamers or above. And with Ertz, again, all about profiles, all about production. We're talking about a guy that had 4 straight top 5 seasons before being injured. We found out kind of after the fact, but during too. I mean, he was playing through injury last season in a complete dud season for the Eagles overall. But a late second, a third round rookie pick valuation, I think with Zach Ertz, I mean, he can absolutely walk in and be a potential 100+ target player, which we know is the fast track to being a tight end one and upside from there.
Yeah, I think so. And you kind of hope now rather than August, because then you're getting him in the building, all those things situated. I just wonder if he's kind of eroding physically a little bit, and that that this could kind of be it's going to look on paper like, hey, this is a good situation all around, but in reality, whoever gets Ertz is going to be, in 6 months, be like, yeah, there's a reason why there was a decline, and there's a reason why Philadelphia let him walk. I think there's there's a Twitter account called "Did Zach Ertz break a tackle?" and there's something to that effect, and it's pretty comedic, and the answer is no, quite a bit. So, and that's an ongoing trend. So, that's really the one. The others, we're going to talk about some of the guys that are potential cuts and post June 1 guys. I'll say one other one that I think is interesting is I think potentially Evan Ingram could be potentially out there. Another one is David Njoku, both guys in the last year of their deals and kind of falling out of favor a little bit with their current teams. I think those are interesting ones in addition to the ones that you added.
Yeah, Harrison Bryant was an award winner in college, and they kind of fell into the lap, in early to mid day 3. I don't think, you never go into the draft expecting, and that's why you address needs in free agency before that, and the Browns did, but they also signed Austin Hooper previously. Njoku, I thought picking up that 5th-year option was just quizzical, and we're checking our watch. I mean, we're just waiting for Njoku to go elsewhere and sort of be on the actually more extended Eric Ebron. Oh, it didn't work out early on, but guy can play. He's going to get many opportunities. He's flashed. I remember he came in, there was a couple games late in the season last year where you saw some typical rangy David Njoku type plays. And it's not, so it just seems like it's a hard luck way that it worked out, whether it was injury, he needed a little more developmental time early in his career. And it does feel 25 to 30, and he's kind of venturing into that bucket of his age curve right now that it feels like a new team, new environment, and getting unleashed to a certain degree with minimal competition on the depth chart. We could be cooking with gas here. You mentioned a couple of different landing spots, other ones that I think a guy walks into, and I know you've mentioned Anthony Ferkser before, but color me skeptical. He's going to come all the way home and be,
don't
top 10.
Don't do me like that, Chad.
I know.
Don't do me like that.
Don't you dare. But Tennessee has available targets. They're talking about, adding Julio Jones. Wide receiver 2-3 is a question mark. but tight end as well. We'll see. The Jets, pretty open. Sorry, Chris Herndon. You're pretty much not on the success track at this point. Day 3, you've been inconsistent. And then Jacksonville is another one. Yes, rookie quarterback. Yes, they have some talent at wide receiver, but relatively, it's a black hole. I do like myself, Chris Manhertz from Carolina days. We talk 2 tight end. It's sort of my jam in Dynasty. That is an affliction, and frankly, there's not a huge amount of benefit, but it does help in like this, looking for landing spots and soft spots. And Jacksonville is open. Buffalo, you mentioned Arizona. So this bucket of guys like Ertz and Ebron and Jimmy Graham, and Cameron Brate even, these are productive profiles to some degree over a span of their career. So this is important because these are not incoming rookies where you have zero idea. They've done something to like a top 10, top 15 level fantasy-wise before.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that the research that I've done on the tight end position, I'm not going to say it's a solved position, but there's a lot of patterns that keep appearing where at other positions it's a little bit more it's a little bit more difficult to sort of find those. But the pattern that constantly reappears is the guy that's been a really good producer that everyone thinks is over the hill, and ultimately he's got a starting job. And that tends to be pretty effective in terms of getting, whether that's low end wide tight end 1 or high end tight end 2 type production. You just look at Jimmy Graham in past years, Gronkowski. I mean, we could go back, Jason Witten, the year that he came back and was with Dallas. I mean, those patterns just keep reappearing. And so Ertz sort of fits that. And Jimmy Graham's another one that I'm in on Cole Kmet quite a bit just because of what his cost was. And I'm looking at our projections for Cole Kmet and I'm like, I don't all right, he's like a top 16, 17, 18 guy and startup draft valuation, but we're projecting him way later than that. It's an interesting conundrum there. Maybe that changes if Graham's a cut. And I think that's one of the worst deals in all of football. But I mean, again, if he lands someplace, right? Again, it's one of those things that pattern keeps reappearing. That's kind of why I like him as a sneaky, dirty, tight end, 1-2 turn type guy. At the 10 to 15 range in terms of outcomes at a tight end 30 cost if he's back with the Bears, just because that pattern keeps reappearing, and he's one that I think as long as he's playing. And healthy, that he's probably going to produce enough to just, get by and be fantasy viable.
Yeah, I think it's like quarterback where tight end, if you're not shooting the ceiling, right? You're not shooting for Darren Waller, and top 2-3 outcomes, just go dirt cheap, right? I mean, I think the danger is you pay tight end 8 price for Irv Smith and he doesn't come home. And paying that price, you really have to have confidence that they have top 5 potential, not 2 years from now, right now, because you can pay. I mean, a lot of the guys we've already mentioned are like, you could pay a third. And like being a serial, as you mentioned, looking at the waiver wire, Jimmy Graham was on waiver wires to close last year. And quarterback, even if it's super flex and tight end, I do not freak out that I have a quote unquote need. Because typically you can find stuff off the waiver wire, injury away options, backups are typically out there to a large degree. But Jimmy Graham, he's had 7 top 12 seasons, and I think you highlighted it correctly. Dirty, you mentioned dirty. I mean, really dirty, greasy, grimy, but he'll get it done. Jason Witten in PPR, the year before he left, the year after he came back, Tony Gonzalez for 3 years where everyone wanted to wipe him off the face of the planet. So these are guys that Jimmy Graham, in that season where they had Cole Kmet last year and Graham felt like he was nearly retired. He was tight end 15 in adjusted points per game.
Right.
And yet you can probably throw out a 4th to get him.
Uh-huh.
So who are you drafting in the 4th round of, a super flex 1 tight end league, even with premium, whatever? Who are you getting in the 4th round that is likely over 1-2? Don't put it out off Graham that he's not going to play 3+ years. Who knows? But these all-timer meaning over the last 10 to 15 years, who's been the most productive guys? And Eric Ebron, he's had 5 straight years top 18. If he goes somewhere else, and guess what? They're running him out the door. They drafted Freiermuth. They probably shouldn't have Ebron beyond this year at the most. Jimmy Graham, they bridged the gap last year. You need to move on to your round 2 tight end. I get it. So Graham goes elsewhere. He goes to one of these openings. He aggregates targets, scores 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. Boom. Top 15, top 18 guy yet again.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a question on the Cole Kmet front? Because I'm troubled by research this week. If you could get what you paid for him last year, would you do it? Would you get whatever pick you paid for him? Would you, if you
in this year's class?
Going forward. So if you paid, early second and
I think
early, like mid to late second,
mid to late second,
like next year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's sort of, again, you're getting a day 2 tight end. And you're getting a guy that, again, I thought he was high floor, low ceiling, kind of like Pat Freiermuth. I mean, you would almost be able to get Pat Freiermuth for the same, right? And let's face it, they're similar players.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in general, here's always the trap. It's kind of the trap with drafting quarterback in a start 1 as well. How liquid is that going to be? If you don't shoot the ceiling, what does it mean? So tight end, it always feels like it. You get to the later second, you get to the 3rd round, you're like, oh, tight end's the pick. But you start spending 3-4 roster spots, that's a mistake. You start, drafting guys that if they're a tight end 1, is it tight end 9, 11, 13? I mean, it's really not a big deal from tight end 15 to 18, where we just said you could pay a 4th round pick and just rent these guys and cycle them through, have minimal allegiance. I mean, you could pay a 4th for Jimmy Graham and be like, I got a guy off the waiver wire. Rosters are tight, and I end up cutting Jimmy Graham or whatever, and you don't really feel it because you paid a 4th and you used him for half a season or whatever, or maybe you flipped him for a 4th after you used him a little bit. Who knows? But the point is, I think tight end can be a trap, and I caution people from being too aggressive in 1.5 PPR just because you're boosting scoring a little bit. But let's not get over our skis of what that really means. 2 PPR, okay, let's react a little bit, and 2 tight end, we're going to react a lot, but I just think in stock leagues, people gravitate. So if you want to be open to this, I think to some extent, you got to stop drafting them. Like you need to have one approach, right? I mean, because if you got 3 tight ends, you just drafted Pat Freiermuth, you drafted Cole Kmet last year, are you going to pick up Jimmy Graham off the waiver wire? Probably not. Are you going to be super interested if you already have 3 tight ends with David Njoku for a late 3rd on the prospect that he moves? Like probably not. So if you're going to be transient and just open to all opportunities, I think you gotta stick to the lean and mean thing. Just that has to be your approach globally.
Yeah, I like the idea of being transient. Let's give that a shot. The
transient tight ends.
Yeah, transient tight ends. Just ride my bike, just on the tight end waiver wire. I like this. Here's the thing: you brought up a name, and it just sort of. I've been working on a different project this week, and you brought up Irv Smith. So he's going 10-01 in startup drafts in the past month. And if that's, and he's going, his median is tight end 10. So basically right at the end of the tight end 1 landscape. Why on earth would you do that when you could get Gronkowski 6 rounds later, right? And who's probably pegged to have a better season this year than him. You can go Jared Cook 6 rounds later. You could go Hayden Hurst 9 rounds later. You can go Jimmy Graham 13, 14 rounds later. You can go all these guys that, I mean, you basically, again, kind of what you're saying. Are you going to sharpshoot Irv Smith tight end 3 finish at any point in the next 5 years?
With Jefferson and Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen, and everyone wants to run Kirk Cousins out of the building. Right. I mean, good luck.
Right.
And I was just looking, for example, I was just looking at rushing attempts inside, I think it was the 5-yard line. Minnesota is way up there. So this is not the Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith is going to aggregate his way to 12 touchdowns and 8 of them are from inside the 5-yard line. This is not, that's not happening. And Irv Smith doesn't have that supersized behemoth profile either. He's more like Jonnu Smith or something. So good luck.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. And Higbee rounds later. It just keeps going on and on.
You can name half the guys that are, in the next 20 tight ends and say, why not that guy? It's Irv Smith for that guy plus? Really? Right. What? Yeah. I'm interested. I'm listening. Yeah. I'm in front of your table at said rummage sale. I'm here for this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, and I think you mentioned this before. I mean, what if you just play the arbitrage game at tight end, right? I mean, unless you are, you have or are getting Kelsey, I would say Waller, Hawkinson, maybe there's somebody else. Sorry, I'm not putting Kittle in there. I have some concerns that he's going to be someone that is easily projectable and there's not more downside than the others from a floor ceiling perspective. And I wouldn't even put Mark Andrews in there. Like, is he a trap? If he's a first round in a one tight end format valuation, I mean, why would you not say, okay, Andrews, where can I go and pick up something I find valuable as an additional piece? Like, let's be real. I mean, can you go to, Hunter Henry and, Mark Andrews and a second for Hunter Henry in the first? Like, these types of things, because it's like, is there really a big difference?
Yeah, it's interesting. Wouldn't Andrews, I mean, you and I have been on Andrews since he was at Oklahoma. Like, we're both Andrews fans. Like, if he got a crack in the Kansas City offense, like, I wouldn't, give me warm and tingles all over the place. Like, give me the volume, give me the Kelsey volume, and on a per route run basis, like, he's basically been, that effective. It's just a low volume scenario. So,
and guess what? Yeah. What are they doing? Trying to improve wide receiver. So look, what we always say is look at what the NFL's trying to tell us, right? What's Baltimore trying to tell you? We are not happy with wide receiver. They told us last offseason. They're telling us again this offseason. And who knows if this fixes it? I like Rashad Bateman. I like Tylan Wallace. To me was, a bad situation. What's his upside? But he's a quality prospect going there. So is there any, it has to come from somewhere. And I know they don't have a 2 tight end system. I was actually looking at how shallow and thin that tight end depth chart. We used to joke. They used to have 4 guys. I know the joke was always if someone was a free agent, maybe Baltimore gives them a call. Like, that was a running joke. I was making a joke. So I think that he's going to market share, the heck out of that Baltimore, they used to have Hayden Hurst, a first rounder there. So, but wide receiver, if it's improved, where's it going to come from? The de facto wide receiver 1, which is Mark Andrews.
Can I ask you a question now that we've found ourselves talking about Baltimore? I can't get over, I think the most interesting contract situation in maybe all of football is, do you give Russell Wilson like 5 for 175? Like,
you mean Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, what did I say? Russell Wilson? Yeah, Lamar Jackson. Can you give Lamar Jackson 5 for 175?
Here's the thing. As a franchise, can you not give him 5%? Here's the other part of the coin is, and we've seen this before. It's close to unprecedented. Well, I guess Kirk Cousins is the closest thing, right? To truly franchise, and then, we're not even going to trade you. Just bye, guys. Like, Kirk Cousins is the closest thing. And Kirk Cousins in Washington did, again, he was good, but where did he lead them as a team? The answer is nowhere. Lamar Jackson's actually, it would be an interesting thought process to say, because they can franchise him twice, right? So you could technically control him with the 5th-year option plus 2, 7 years, 7 years without truly committing, right? And to be fair, if we're operating Lamar Jackson, a blend between wide receiver, back to the draft days, quarterback and running back, you're kind of looking at, a compromised window, right? If you're looking at valuing him or saying how much of allegiance into the future should we have, if you operate almost like a blended approach, then why? Because they still have this year, which is the 5th-year option. They could franchise him twice.
Yes, they could. And he's made a ton of money at that point, and you just say, I don't know, and it's not even like, this is something that NFL teams probably aren't going to rethink, so it's probably a moot academic exercise at this point. But the hit rate on these guys, when you give that, I call it the quarterback supermax. When you give that, it hasn't been flawless, right? So if you're gonna see a couple of these probably coming down the pike in terms of Allen, in terms of Lamar Jackson. We just saw one with Dak, but we've seen them go to Goff and Wentz, and the history on these is not great. Heck, Watson, right? The history, Watson hasn't even played a snap on it yet, and you sort of look at that and you're like, or maybe it's 1 year, but I think he's still got 3 years to go. I mean, there's a lot of risk in that, and I look at that, and I look at Lamar Jackson, and this seems like a clear audition, with Andrews, with Bateman, with Marquise Brown, and can you win a Super Bowl? Like, the question that I'm going to ask is, if you're evaluating a quarterback situation, can you beat Mahomes can you beat a good Mahomes game on the road in January? And if the answer is no, what are you doing? And because that's probably what's going to have to happen to really get a realistic shot. Like, that's what you're going to have to play against. I don't know.
I think if they do these next 2 to 3 years and he doesn't get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl, and then again, if he does, you pay him. You pay the man,
right.
Paid the man his money, from Rounders. But if he doesn't, I think that sort of answers that, right? I mean, he's gotten them to the playoffs. They've had good regular seasons. But again, there's legitimate global questions on if he will be able to guide, and that's sort of Lamar Jackson. I'm just been below market, and I know. I mean, I've been looking at. You talked about just research projects. I've been looking at a couple of different things, and Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. You start looking at, well, what if they don't have a magical rushing season? Because they're basically mid QB2s if you look at them from a passing perspective. So that's it. And then you get extra credit for all they do rushing, and it could get them to high quarterback 1. But we saw with Lamar Jackson where it's not super magical, you're looking at QB 10, 11, 12. I mean, they're mortal, just like other quarterbacks if they only put up, 25 passing touchdowns and they don't run a bunch. It's a higher flip. The point is that range of outcomes. I mean, high totals, Cam Newton was one of the few guys to be used like a truck and a fullback and actually get goal line stuff. And goal line usage, like Cam Newton, is way more predictable. Or Josh Allen gets used down there. Then, you start breaking some from 10 plus, 20 plus yards. And Kyler Murray had 10 plus touchdowns. Really? He's one of my most glaring guys because I look at him and he's average as a passer, completely average on the NFL landscape. So it's scary because now you're betting solely with the high price tag on the rushing part and high variance. You can get some yards, but guess what? What if you just don't scramble as much? What if it's a little more as a passer and those don't turn into high efficiency usage as opposed to getting outside the pocket and running for 15 yards? You get 10 of those in a year. It's like, oh, CNI single, the difference between a 250 hitter and a 300 hitter is the Hall of Fame. I can't remember what movie that is, but yeah, you just, you got to be really careful. Another tangent there, but the quarterback rushing and you're paying the full fare at QB 3 to 5 prices for a guy where it's I'm buying you as a running back. I'm still waiting to see if you're a quarterback. Good luck. Because Dynasty, it's not forever because you turn that roster quite a bit, but the investment is technically forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Can I ask you 2 questions on the contract front? Just to loop back to that before we go. Just 2. I'll flip the chairs on you a little bit. You usually lead the questions. I'm going to lead them. Who does Aaron Rodgers play for in 2021?
Green Bay Packers.
Who does Julio Jones play for in 2021?
Not Atlanta. Not Atlanta. Whoever. No, I know. I mean, I look at teams that I find it quizzical that a team that actually has good wide receivers would truly be interested in paying full freight. I do think a team like Tennessee makes absolute sense. I think that would highlight a lot of the things we talk about, which is give NFL teams options. So all this talk about, oh, Josh Reynolds is a sleeper. Come on, let's be real. I mean, is it likely Dez Fitzpatrick comes in and he's the week 1 starter and he sees 100 targets and he's a revelation this year? Again, really unlikely. Like Leonard Fournette, just pop on over like last year when teams have options, and Julio Jones, half the NFL 9 months ago didn't think, oh, Julio Jones is an option for us. So when they're presented with new information, these high level players get recycled. If they're suddenly not wanted by their team, they move on. So and the whole quarterback being moved thing, I know we saw Stafford on the move. I mean, that was an interesting situation that Detroit was like, hey, we're not close and we just gotta move on. We're getting a pick. We'll take Goff. that was a very special case, in my opinion. Like an actual game changer, Aaron Rodgers moving, Russell Wilson. I'm on record. I mean, this year, no. Next year, to me, it's a lot more plausible, but it still is like, are you serious? Are you like, so that's the part that's going to boggle my brain when and if it happens. But some of the cap stuff going on this year compared to next year, I mean, cap is always, it's better to wait in general. How about you just honor your contract and have the player play and they play well and everything's perfect.
That's
and
funny,
everything, and you get penalized more and more the more removed from that actually ending to we want to get out. We hate life. We hate our decisions. We hate this contract. We don't want this player here. We got to do something. It's kind of like that Dynasty GM where they get to the point and they go, oh, I've got to sell this player today. And you're like, check swatch. It's June 2nd. Why do you have to sell this player today? Why do you have to make a horrific sell of like Dalvin Cook today? Why? Nothing's happening. Today's not a day. There's no exploding Mission Impossible bomb. This doesn't matter. And yet NFL teams, it doesn't make it seem like Aaron Rodgers cannot be on that team this year. Why?
Everything can get, money can cure all problems, right? Most problems. I'm kind of with you. I think he's the most logical thing is he's back there. It's tough this time of year, especially in this climate, to have to fit one of those contracts. It's just
well,
tough.
the other part that gets me is if they're not here's the problem. There's more benefit to doing it after June 1. Yet there's a lot more incentive for the team to sell before the NFL draft to get capital this year, an influx of picks or a pick at least this year. And when you start saying, well, now, the best time for them to move on is going to be a trade and it's going to be post June 1, 2022. Well, now you're out on 2022 picks as well.
Right.
So that deadline that really makes a difference if you're above or below that June 1 threshold, it doesn't align with the best interests of the team. Like Atlanta, right? I mean, they would have rather dealt Julio Jones in April 17th and include capital for this year. But yet, it makes more sense if we do it after June. Well, that's okay, great.
Right.
It doesn't align there. I do want to remind you that if you're listening to shows like this one, you want to consistently win your fantasy football leagues. It takes time, it takes acumen. You need a Footballguys premium subscription to give you the edge, help you make winning decisions in more time. Saves you time, gets you the edge. Projections are already out for the 2021 season. Sync your leagues to My Footballguys, which is going to enhance suggested trades. It's also going to help your lineup decisions, waiver wire, everything you need to have your best in season yet for your dynasty squads. And it gets better. You get the early bird discount. So lock that in now in July. We're about 6 weeks away from the paywall coming down. I'm finishing out a commissioner series that's up there. Jordan, you did some work after the NFL draft. And things are flowing. We're going through all the divisions. We're predicting it as a staff, as well as some underrated, overrated players. So many features coming out. Once that fire hose gets turned on at full force, and it's coming very soon, and that paywall hits, you do not want to be outside that paywall. So we'll do the work, and you do the winning. For Dynasty trades this week, and we also have some Shark Pool comments from the Dynasty forum to get to here. And interesting trade here. This is one quarterback. Jordan, one quarterback.
Oh boy. Got to recalibrate.
So we got 105 and a second next year for J.K. Dobbins and one of our favorites, John Smokey Brown.
So sorry, I didn't catch the beginning. J.K. Dobbins and Smokey.
For 105 this year and a second next year.
105 this year and a second next year. Oh, man, you're kind of resetting the clock if you figure that's like Javonte Williams.
Exactly.
Man, that's interesting. That's basically essentially what it is, right? And you're basically getting an uptick. I think Dobbins is probably better. My question with Dobbins is the thing that concerns me with Dobbins is I wonder what, again, we're going to go back to the Baltimore offense. How big is that ceiling, right? And how big is that? What's the receiving game? is if it's 40 catches, like that's
it's hard to be a high running back one. Yeah.
And with a running quarterback, he's going to siphon touchdowns. And the Dobbins upside thing, and I was doing some research, and our projections have him significantly below where his draft stock is in terms of dynasty drafts, and that is a bad indicator to me. So I don't, I think he's a better player than Javonte Williams is, but give me the pick and give me the future insulation.
Okay. Yeah. Baltimore was DFL and it wasn't particularly close of targets to running backs last year. They were behind Tennessee with Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. And Gus Edwards, to be fair, I have Dobbins shares, but give me the arbitrage for Gus Edwards, being that he's 1/10 the cost.
Yes.
And I mean, a guy that I think he had 706 last year. So, and if you're looking at two guys that aren't going to catch a ton of passes, I mean, why not get the much cheaper guy? Edwards has shown himself in the NFL. If there's an injury, to Edwards, yes, that improves Dobbins, but it's a bigger impact if Dobbins goes down. So you're getting a lot of insulation there for that. And yeah, it is interesting because you're looking at some two good metric profiles: Dobbins round 2, but also Javonte Williams day 2 as well. So we'll see how that goes. And again, if Denver gets a quarterback and Javonte Williams is the week 1 starter in 2022, how much closer is this? Right. or does it flip entirely?
Right.
All right, we got FFPC Superflex, who are operating with shallow rosters, and it includes some notable players we've talked about plenty. Actually, a couple we've talked about in this episode. So we've got Dak Prescott, Irv Smith on one side. Other side, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kyle Pitts.
It's not even. I'm not flinching, and I'm taking Dak.
Okay.
So when you get a chance to take a supermax quarterback, you do it, and he's the guy. And you, listen. I like both the profiles of the other guys. Like, give me Dak Prescott.
Okay. Do you think Pitts in like FFPC with shallow rosters, with the obtainable nature of tight ends off the waiver wire, and some of these teams hoard 3 or 4 of them for minimal reason, in my opinion. Do you think Pitts is, for some people that are taking them in that format, like 102? I saw a 101. Mm-hmm. I mean, is it out of control? Like he's got to be. I mean, that's produced. There's so much pressure on him to hit ultimate ceiling, right?
You've given yourself very little room for error, and like I like to shoot at big targets that I can miss on both sides of, right? And that I can say, hey, listen, like if the guy goes up, if he does better than I project, that's awesome. If he does a little bit worse than I project, well, at least it didn't bankrupt me, right? I sort of hate being in that situation where if it goes bad, it's I mean, the profile, I saw him go, this is incredible to me, and I still can't believe that it happened. And it's been like 2 weeks since I saw it. He was the number 1 non-quarterback off the board in a Superflex draft that I saw. That is insane. It's insane.
Well, round 1 running backs miss sometimes, and round 1 tight ends don't. That's my logic. I'm sticking to it. That was actually me in the draft. Sorry.
No, that was a startup draft too. That was a startup draft.
Oh,
that wasn't. Okay. That's over McCaffrey, and that's over.
I redact my comment.
It's
yeah.
Like I can see it in some of these formats where it's a super juiced up premium. I think there you might get into a spot where it sort of matters enough that you could say, okay, like I'll take a shot with him over, and I think there's a fair argument where it's super juiced up premiums. I play in some 2 PPRs and I play in some, juiced receiving yards and reception points. And so it basically operates as 2 PPR, maybe even a little bit more. I could see him there at right with Harris. I sort of understand that. But outside of that, I mean, I'm not. It's just too expensive, and so
in general, is it going to be a danger game to pay a first for a tight end that's not a cornerstone, already been there, done that, proven player? Yeah. I mean, is that just like a global? Just generally, don't do that.
Yeah, and how many
you don't even trade for that, right?
Right. It's not, there's not many that you could get a random future first for. There's not many tight ends you can actually do that with. It's kind of like quarterback in that way. And, I don't know, you look at the guys that we've done this with before, the guys that we've taken really early in rookie drafts at the tight end position, we have not succeeded at. So maybe this one's different, but I think this is a really difficult position to project and to predict. Because it's just really hard. And we've seen that over and over again. Guys, we constantly complain about Evan Ingram's usage and how he fits in. And Ebron went through the whole thing. And I mean, this goes on and on. And I mean, OJ Howard and Joku. I mean, we could keep going on and on. I mean, I get Pitts is really good. And I sort of believe in Arthur Smith. But there's a lot of problems that can go wrong.
You got to get the targets, got to have a massive touchdown season and it really has. I mean, if you kind of look back at Jimmy Graham and Gronkowski, Jason Witten, what the parallels are good quarterback play. A lot of them had either unsettled wide receiver depth charts or lacking a true wide receiver one. There is a historical blueprint for how you typically get big time seasons. Darren Waller, right? Good enough quarterback, lack of wide receiver one. You have to have at least one of those qualities. You got to get big time targets. Otherwise, you have to have the magical touchdown season. And what's happening on the magical touchdown season? Well, we'll let Robert Tonyan this year answer that. But we'll see how that goes. We'll see. Typically what happens, it comes back down. It comes back down like Kyler Murray's rushing touchdowns, probably. All right. So we've got a Superflex Aaron Rodgers trade. So we've got Superflex, Aaron Rodgers, and Austin Eckler for Alvin Kamara and Brandon Ayuk.
Wow. Wow, Eckler and that
team Eckler.
It's team. Wow. So it's, and you said Superflex too, right?
Yep.
Who was the other person besides Kamara? It was Rodgers, and Eckler, and Kamara and Ayuk. Wow, there's some good players in this deal. I think it's a lot of what you think about Rodgers.
If you knew Rodgers played 3 more seasons,
Rodgers,
is that just a smash?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely Rodgers. That would be my take on it.
You think over the next 2 years, Eckler and Kamara are going to be super far apart? Okay.
I was just going to say exactly that. I mean, without Breeze, you're sort of going through a transition period. That was the exact question I was going to
last season. Quick quiz. Last season, Chargers or Saints, what running back group had more targets? They were both in the top 3. And they were that's all you need to know. Chargers were higher by 6. Eckler is an absolute Danny Woodhead like machinery of PPR.
Yeah.
So be careful.
And he's one that significantly outproduces where his real draft position is, according to our projections.
His dynasty juice is.
Yeah.
Generally, it's like, maybe I'll give a late first for Eckler. Okay. All right. I'll just keep him. All right. We got 12-team Superflex, Joe Mixon or AJ Dillon, and a 22 first.
So I actually find it interesting that the Mixon angle is coming back around, because I thought the market really had soured on him, and now we're getting some positive buzz out of him, and there's some spots where I could potentially see myself making a move. I wonder how much of a true difference maker he is, just because I think the legend of him is probably greater than the player of him actually is.
Been saying it for a couple of years. Is Joe Mixon the guy who apparently is a round one pedigree guy that everyone thought faded, or is he actually a late round 2 NFL draft pick? And already he's been a success within that prism.
Absolutely,
as a low end running back 1. Yeah,
absolutely, he's been a success. And by the way,
I'm assuming he's going to be better though. That's the point of assuming the career year or years are coming at 20 now. What 24 and change, 25 and change.
Yeah. And by the way, as you were saying that, all I kept thinking about was Cam Akers, by the way. So if we're talking about similar things.
Well, Akers could buy Mixon and Eckler. So I'm all in on that. Give me 2 shots. How about that? In PPR, Eckler or Cam Akers this year? And if you answer Eckler, just imagine what you can get on top.
Yeah. That's a pivot. That's a pivot. Obviously, you're giving up some of the insulation going long term, but I will say, the more study that I do, you're as insulated as you are productive. And if you're not productive,
Right.
you fall in price, and it doesn't really matter what age you are.
Imagine if Akers misses a cross section of this year and Darrell Henderson looks good.
Right.
Where do we sit January?
That's what happened last year too, by the way, where it was all over the place. So, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. So we got to circle back on Mixon for AJ Dillon in the first. Man, that's really interesting because I think
super flex first.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Probably the first, because the first is pretty attractive, and I think you could probably piece together enough from if it's Dillon, if it's Henderson, if it's Gus Edwards, if it's Jamal Williams and Devontae Booker, right? You could
sort of have a couple actual starters already. I mean, you might be fine if you're going to be. You feel okay about your running backs without Mixon. Then I think the upside shot is absolutely the pick and Dillon, because I think Dillon at a minimum is sort of going to be Gus Edwards like. Yeah. I mean, I still think he's a threat for 10 plus touchdowns. I think, he could be that Jamal Williams role, which was flex viable, and there's upside from there. He could have multi-touchdown games. And this is all with Aaron Jones healthy. Now, if he gets injured, sky's the limit. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a cross section of the year where Dillon could be auto start and Mixon in the same sort of team roster is not. So, and then the first, and again, I think you can say that there's a story in the off season coming up that Mixon is not many people are going to give that 22 first.
Right.
For him
that wasn't happening in March, let alone next year. You know what I mean? That was a tough get in March.
Mixon's like one of the lowest, youngest projected week 1 starters out there.
Right. Which is incredible because I have him locked in for a couple of years. Right. So when you sort of look and you want to arbitrage profiles, like he's one that you can actually bail to and be like, hey, listen, there's a couple of years of insulation here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's mainly though a floor ceiling thing. I mean, if he finishes, running back 13 and 18 over the next 2 years, what does that mean?
Right.
Not a lot. I mean, if you knew that, you'd rather take your shot on Dillon in the pick or Dillon and another running back, or just like give me chances, give me cracks.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some of the quotes from the Shark Pool this week. We'll have a little banter to close the show here. Anytime I see Ayuk in a trade, I cringe. He's going to be uber stellar, if that's a word. Hyphenated.
Uber stellar.
Uber stellar.
I like that. I'm a Ayuk guy. I will say I think as I sort of look at some more of the advanced metrics on him, he's very good. Last year, I wouldn't say he's elite at some of it. He was very good from a fantasy production and all that stuff. And probably if you adjusted for quarterback play and the rest of the offense, he'd probably be even better. That's kind of the argument that I would make for him. I'm a big fan of Ayuk, and he's probably going undervalued.
Yeah. My pro comment is he came in right away, a la Odell Beckham, Justin Jefferson, some of these guys that they just looked apart right away. And that is really hard as a rookie wide receiver, especially under the guise of what happened in 2020. And they didn't have a good lead up to the season and typically, not normal. And then the other part, but the downside is competition for targets, more run centric team. Is there going to be, so love the career start, love the player, think he's firmly on success track. Now, high end success track. Is he going to get 150 targets this year or next year? I'm skeptical of all that stuff. But I do like, in terms of my teams and scouting and all this kind of stuff, I do like good players. And I think Ayuk's a good player. Now, does he have a top 10 season this year? I think that's a lot more ambiguous. But long term, I would love to have him within my top 4 or 5 wide receivers. Absolutely. I get the sense that the franchise understands it's not in win now mode, and I see no benefit to running DeAndre Swift into the ground. It's not about touches, but the quality of touches. He says Kamara has been the best fantasy running back since entering the league, and he only averages 11 carries a game. McCaffrey only over 13. So he mentions with guys like Eckler that Swift, I want 10 to 12 carries, 4, 5, 6 catches a game, and that anticipated workload in the 16 to 18 touch range.
I want 25 touches a game out of my running back. I think the premise is right in terms of, I mean, if it's, what's the expected points of a touch, right? It depends on if it's a rush or if it's a reception. I think it's 3.5 or 2.5 times. I think it's 3.5 times the PPR points, I think, for a reception than a rush at or for a target than an attempt for a running back. And so yeah, I mean, I still think that Swift has 100+ target upside just because they're gonna have to throw the ball. I will say though, I have the Jamal Williams theory, which is basically he's the anti Lamar Miller, which is he's basically good at everything. He kind of does everything pretty well. And that guy, just think about your own workplace. That guy or that gal is pretty valuable. And if they can do a lot of things, they tend to be a good employee, right? They maybe not are particularly flashy, but you can sort of hand them a project and they can get it done. That's Jamal Williams. And that guy tends to be undervalued. And, he gets more opportunities than the rest. It's like a better version of Rex Burkhead at this point. And whereas you see guys like Lamar Miller, maybe that's what's going on with Swift right now. They just don't trust him for the whole thing. And we kind of wonder about that. I mean, I think Swift's better than they're giving him credit for, but we'll see. I do think the receiving angle to Swift though can be truly difference making.
Yeah, I looked it up because I knew I had that number somewhere, and it's like 3.3x, 3.5x, somewhere in that zone of you get a reception, you get a target, a lot more valuable than that carry. The carry means, are you going to get the goal line carry? The carry means, are you going to have more opportunities to break a big one that actually matters, more so than the mindless, well, you got 18 carries. That doesn't tell me a whole lot in and of itself.
Yeah, if memory serves, it was 0.44, between 0.4 and 0.45 for a rush, and then for receiving, the last time I looked, I think it was like 1.4, 1.5, something like that. So that's kind of actually, just for context, it's about exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, in my experience, the overvalued, the people are willing to overpay, sometimes willing to move up.
Chad, can you say that again?
In my experience, top picks and startups are so overvalued that many times people are willing to overpay, sometimes massively, to move up.
Yeah, I think format matters in that statement. I do think it has become less common for people to do that. I think people used to do that a lot. I think the market's sort of smartened up to that a little bit and not been quite as aggressive on trading up and drafts. I think that's something we've probably talked about before as well. But I think in this market, it's really interesting because it's quarterbacks up there. Whereas other times it has been other positions. So I think that is an added thing. If I have a really high pick, I'm probably not trading out of it. I'm probably taking Mahomes or Dak. But if you can sort of reap the benefit later on in the first round, like that's a smash scenario to me.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest changes from when I started in Dynasty and even 5 years ago compared to now is it used to be very easy to get big hauls moving out of round one. And now sometimes I would say it's maybe one out of every 4 or 5 startups that I hear about or, listeners do where I get to see the results and seeing a big haul return that's vintage 3 to 5 years ago. And it seems like that is drying up as folks are getting a little more smarter in terms of not selling out the farm to start with a double stack, with two first rounders in their startup draft. I really like Michael Gallup's chances starting in 2022.
I don't want to wait, right? Like maybe that's true, but you got to burn a roster spot. It's not cheap. Hey, there's guys in that range that can truly help you. I don't really want to wait. I mean, Corey Davis is going after him. Gallup's going 1207. Corey Davis is going after him, and I think he's got like 130 target upside, if not more than that. Landry's going right next to him, and he's got viability this year. You don't know where Gallup's going to land. Rager's going right there again. He's probably got more viability this year. Robbie Anderson's going there. I mean, Cooks, Fuller. I mean, it's a murderer's row of my target guys in that range. And I'm like, yeah, I want to take a year being patient. Like that's exactly the bet that's exactly the thing I don't want to do at that range of the draft.
Is Michael Gallup as your wide receiver 7?
Correct. That's
because here's the thing: is he really going to get paid and be a team's number 1? He's going to probably be a number 2, right?
Right.
And only select NFL offenses does that matter. Does that position matter?
Right.
So be careful. Rashad Bateman is a quality prospect, but I question how high the ceiling is with Baltimore.
I agree.
Noted. Last one here. We got comparing startup draft deals and existing league deals can be a useful tool. This is what Jordan's been doing for the last hour. Can be a useful tool to help steal some value during the startup.
I do think comparing deals, thinking about, I think the idea of thinking about, and this is something that you sort of tipped me off to in conversations that we've had, thinking about if you could take this pick, right? If you're going to spend, I don't know, 1103 on Jalen Reagor, for example, is that what's the pick equivalency in terms of rookie picks, right? What could you do that? Would you trade that basically Reagor for whatever pick that would be? Which I think is a really good way to think about it, right? In terms of how thinking about those trades, thinking about the, basically the opportunity cost at those trades, I think is an interesting way to do it. I don't do a ton of, hey, I'm going to, buy this guy and then sell him, right? Because you kind of already are tipped off to the idea that the market's probably not going to be super high on the guy because you got him at a discount. So in your particular league, the other thing too is I try and play production. I try and play profiles. I try and play that game. I don't get into the playing value game all that much. And so, if I'm trying to guess what other people might think about the value of this guy that I'm thinking about taking, like, I just want to know if he's going to be productive. And if he's going to be productive, like, there's probably a good chance that I can sell him for a profit.
Yeah, that point you made is a good one. I've stopped playing, and I know some people do. I call it reindeer games, just because if you buy a player and you're already thinking about flipping, and when people are like, "Oh, well, I'll just draft this player at 306 in my rookie draft," and if your paramount thought is, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to flip him for a second," nah, you better like him enough, because if that window doesn't open up as fast as you're anticipating, because it's based on early situation, or Des Fitzpatrick's going to be the wide receiver 2 in Tennessee, and then I'll have liquidity on my side. Like, if those things don't occur, now you're stuck with a player that you didn't really like. And it's like, well, what did I do? Well, you rubbed it on your face. Congratulations.
At least you got a roster spot you can clear in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
That's fine.
Well, no, because sunken cost, you're not actually gonna move the needle. Yeah, 306, you're gonna be like, got to hold for at least 2 years so that I can actually look smart for using that pick, even though plenty of people whiff. And they move on quickly. It can be tough there. And the other point that you made is using, looking at both sides, startup draft and existing league, that time value. You draft a team in June, really I call startup month, because we're far removed from the NFL draft. Not a whole lot of stuff is happening. And man, you draft a player and then try to sell off of that. Like you said, somebody's falling, you get a discount. Good luck. The league, basically everybody passed, like the NFL. They all passed a few times. So good luck getting full fare. Like, oh, I'm the smartest guy. You guys just forgot he even existed. Now, a few weeks later, I'm going to try to sell him. Okay. But just Jordan's mantra here is going to be draft players you like. Draft players you, even if it doesn't work out this way, that you anticipate having for a span of time, independent of anything else going on. I like this player, and I'm fine having them on my dynasty team. Because you'd be surprised. You look at your teams, you're like, I don't really like some of these guys. You can change it. You can change it starting now. Every day that you don't trade them or don't repurpose them to something else, you are making the active decision of inactivity to keep them. Every day is a decision.
Failure to act is acting, right?
There you go. So we talked a lot about the potential moves at tight end up at the top of the show, a little bit about quarterbacks and contracts, courtesy of Jordan McNamara. We also talked about dynasty trading. Joe Mixon has an interesting profile, about Austin Eckler, as we typically do, Dak Prescott, J.K. Dobbins. And then finally, talking about optimization, some of these wide receivers. You can like a bunch of wide receivers. It doesn't mean you have to roster them. A little bit about DeAndre Swift from the Shark Pool, as well as Brandon Ayuk, one of our favorites out there from the class of 2020. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.